All right, Nico, can you say welcome to another episode of Healthy Births, Happy Babies?
It's a happy episode. Happy babies.
Welcome back to another episode of Healthy Births, Happy Babies. I'm Dr. Jay Warren. I'm the prenatal and pediatric chiropractor here at the Cap Wellness Center. And this podcast is all about helping you have a proactively healthy pregnancy so you can have a safe, gentle, natural birth. And that's going to allow you to bring your baby into the world that much more gently and healthily so you can start off your family experience more powerfully than if it's full of stress and trauma and other health concerns. So if you are a fan of this show and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Wherever you listen to your podcast, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss an upcoming episode. And also, if you haven't rated or reviewed the podcast and you've enjoyed it and gotten value of it, that will really help me out because that'll allow this podcast to reach more and more parents like yourself that might be missing out on this type of information and helping them along their parenting journey. So thank you in advance for that. And thank you if you already have rated and reviewed. So on today's episode, we're going to be talking all about TummyTime, and we're going to be talking with the expert. Michelle Emanuel is here. She's the developer of the TummyTime method. She teaches it all over the country, and she's going to answer all of those common questions that every parent has about TummyTime. Most parents know how important that it is, and that they should be doing it with their kiddo, but there's tons of questions around how soon do I start and how do I do it and how long should I do it? And the most common question I get is, what do I do if my kid seems to hate TummyTime? And Michelle's here to answer all those kind of questions and really explain why it's so important. And I know after listening to it, you'll be that much more motivated to really give your kid this advantage by doing all of this great TummyTime and all the benefits that your little baby's going to get that will launch them into their toddler years and beyond. So with that, let me introduce Michelle, read her bio to you, and then we'll get right to our conversation. Michelle Emanuel has over 20 years experience as a neonatal pediatric occupational therapist. She's worked in neonatal intensive care units, pediatric critical care, outpatient, and private practice. She developed and began teaching TummyTime method classes over 10 years ago. Michelle has a wide variety of knowledge and skills that includes embryology, newborn and infant development, pre- and perinatal psychology, autonomic nervous system regulation and resiliency, infant sensory processing, polyvagal theory, baby massage, and various forms of manual therapy. Her private practice, her TummyTime method headquarters, and the Infant Neurodevelopmental Training Center for Professionals is located in Cincinnati, Ohio. And so now let me switch over to our conversation with Michelle Emanuel. Michelle, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's going to be a great discussion. We were just even on our pre-chat just a couple of minutes ago. We were just going. I wanted to get the recording going already so others could listen to it as well. Michelle, I've gotten to know your work through your Facebook community. Honestly, I can't remember how I got in touch with it, but I've been part of your closed group there, for which I believe is more for practitioners, and have gotten so much out of it, so much support, and learned a ton. So I want to thank you for that right off the bat. But also all of your work you're doing with the TummyTime method. I'm really happy to have you here so you can teach our listeners why it's so important. But before we start into that, I read your bio there. You've been doing pediatric occupational therapy for years and years and years. But tell us how, in that progression of things, you got to the point that you are now, where you developed this method called TummyTime method and are teaching parents. What spurred that?
Well, that's a great question. It takes me back to when I really intensely started working with babies, and that was in the NICU as an occupational therapist. And I did that for many years, close to 9, and I got a really good basis for working with babies. And I had available to me, because I was in the newborn intensive care unit, their heart rate and their respiratory rate and the oxygen saturation. So I became very attuned to what it was like for a baby through different happenings in the nursery happening and how their heart rate and their respiratory rate and their oxygen rate would correlate with that. And then I transitioned into an outpatient caseload, and I got into working with babies who were mostly full-term babies who were having difficulties with things like torticollis and plagiocephaly, which are like a head turning preference to one side, or neck tightness, and head flattening or head molding. And I was a little bit shocked, actually, because I'd been working with so many premature babies that they were medically fragile, et cetera, to go into working with full-term babies who felt very healthy but were still really challenged with their developmental skills and symmetry, and especially their digestive system, lots of reflux and gas and crying, which a lot of times way back in the day, I've been doing this a long time, was called colic. I mean, try not to call it so much that anymore, because we know now that colic just means crying baby, because babies are crying for many different reasons. So anyway, that led me down the path, and I had in the nursery had to work with babies to help them learn to coordinate their suck, swallow, breathe patterns. So it was very much about oral function, and oral function being a way of saying how baby's doing developmentally. We would say how they're doing maturationally at that time based on how they could do these suck, swallow, breathe things. And so I knew that was a big marker for maturation and how the brain and the nervous system were functioning. So I overlaid that with working with babies with torticollis, because I got interested in working with the polyvagal theory. And that's just a way of looking at how our bodies function on an automatic level.
The polyvagal theory.
The polyvagal theory, going back to our heart rate and our respiratory rate and our oxygen saturation. So I drew correlations, and then I said, hey, wait a minute, these two things really still work together. And babies needed intentional tummy time because there was so much neck and head problems and all these digestive issues, which I knew the research pointed towards being on their belly is actually better for reflux than other positions. And it's also better for gastric emptying, meaning that our tummies actually empty, or especially babies, that's what it shows in the literature, empty their stomach into their small intestine better in the prone or the tummy down position. So I was weaving and knitting and crocheting all of these pieces together and developed the tummy time based on my work as an occupational therapist and sensory integration and how the reflexes were affecting the body and active movements and how to help all of that. So that's how I got into it. Well, and then I started teaching I'm just so excited. Somebody got, me stimulated into like really giving classes out. So I would just teach tummy time classes and have parents come and practice what the method that I came up with, that was a way to help the baby really enjoy tummy time. So many babies have trouble in it. That's why I developed the method, is so that they could find joy and comfort and have, fun in it, because it's necessary in a back sleeping culture to do intentional tummy time.
Right. And that's what I was going to ask about, was like the switch of needing to do intentional tummy time. Did you see that becoming more and more important because of the back to sleep programs?
Yes. Back to sleep was rolled out in 1992. 92. And at the same time, its twin sister program was unrolled called Tummy to Play. And these are both recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics and can be found on their website as well. And our pediatricians are all very supportive of back to sleep, and they should be as equally excited and passionate with the Tummy to Play program. And I think they mostly are, but this was another reason why I came up with the tummy time method, is because there were very little resources in how to help parents beyond saying, do it.
Right.
Go to tummy time. The parents like, what? And many parents they're accountants, or, they're working in non-medical industry. They're not really familiar with infant development, et cetera. Or even if you are, it's still very challenging to have a new baby and, have to keep up with everything. And then if they don't like it, man, a new parent, it's really hard to do. So I was so passionate about coming up with something that babies and parents could both enjoy together, and we could get it done.
Right. And I agree with you. I mean, the majority of parents know they should be doing tummy time, and by virtue of the name of it, and like they know what it is. But the questions that I'm going to be asking you are the typical ones. One, I want to get to, like, if my baby doesn't like it. But, is it is it ever too early to start tummy time?
No. In fact, the earliest tummy time that we should be doing is immediately when we emerge from the womb. Okay, right after birth is the natural time. Everyone knows that we don't lay a newborn baby on its back because the baby will not be able to do what we need it to do. If you lay the baby on its tummy in tummy time on the maternal abdomen, the baby will actually, a newborn baby will actually crawl, locomote, move, sequence these complex motor behaviors right away and find the breast and latch by themselves. But they need to be given the time and the space to do that. And I am absolutely convinced that this first tummy time will really have a big imprint on how the first 3 to 6 months of life go, and even from there on. The implications of this are very big. And so the first one is called a breast crawl. That's the breast crawl. And I'm very passionate about it. So that's the very first tummy time. So that's right away.
Right.
And that first latch needs to happen with the baby's pace and timing. Please, everyone, don't interfere. The mother will have some instincts to help minimally, and everybody else needs to step back unless there's a medical emergency, which there rarely ever is, and hopefully. And this is the sequencing is so important to turn on and enliven the nerves of the cranium. Not to get too much into that. So anyway, once that happens and you're past the first latch and everything, the first 2 or 3 weeks, the gold standard is on the parent's chest. So you really there's a lot of holding and a lot of on the parent's chest. I like to say lean back so that the baby gets to feel a little bit of gravity. And then after that, to really sit down and have intentional tummy time on the floor for about 2 or 3 weeks. And start with a blanket on the floor. It's really, really simple early on.
And how long is like a typical amount of time to start with a baby doing tummy time?
That's a great question too. It's variable based on who you ask. And basically if you start it in the newborn period of time, they're asleep a lot of the time. So when we're doing some tummy time, they're only going to be awake for really short periods of time. And so these are very short periods of time throughout the day. And sometimes early on, I just say do it every diaper change. You're already laying them down to change their diaper. You can just roll them over for a tummy time minute and even wipe their booty and roll them back over. So that can happen a few times a day. But I like to steer people away from thinking about time-based to quality, how well the baby did, and just that we did it frequently. So I usually say, like if I'm working with intentional therapeutic tummy time, I say let's do 5 sessions a day. Okay. And within those 5 sessions, we don't know how long it lasts, but we roll the baby in and out of tummy time 4 or 5 times, So it's more of a how many times to do it rather than how long. Okay. Because if we spread it out throughout the day and make it easier on us, then there's less pressure to do it. And we also, the benefit to that is you find out when the baby likes it a little bit more. You're like, wow, when we do this in the morning, he really rocks it. And so that's another way of like, let's do more in the morning or carve out some more time to do it at that time. But the developmental literature, let's get really, nuts and bolts here, says 30 minutes a day. Okay. So they took a group of 4-month-old babies who had 30 minutes of tummy time a day, compared them to 4-month-old babies who had not had 30 minutes of tummy time a day. And the 4-month-old group who had tummy time scored higher on developmental assessments when compared to those other babies. And then recently there was a study that compared babies that had Down syndrome, which, everybody with Down syndrome has a little bit more lower muscle tone. So sometimes their developmental skills lag because of that. And when they did intentional tummy time, they didn't follow necessarily tummy time method, but when they did intentional tummy time with the babies, babies who had done intentional tummy time scored higher again on developmental assessments. So when compared to babies with the same diagnosis. So this is really important. And we've actually been documenting, there's a lot of literature actually in the research to support tummy time and the need for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's something that, so I'm glad you said that about the timing thing, because people will hear time and they're almost like setting their clocks or, setting the phone and saying, all right, let's get 3 minutes in or something, rather than it being something that allows the baby to work up to, because it is functional exercise, right, for the kiddo. So you want to build up to that. But I think what's happening with some of those parents that saying, well, my kid doesn't like tummy time, when I'm talking more about it, they're doing it like right off the bat for like 15 minutes, and it's
right.
That's a long time to start accessing the posterior body when you haven't done it at all. So I like that kind of permission of like, let's just, even just doing the diaper changes and rolling over and have it be a frequency based rather than just appear like logging in the time.
Mm-hmm. And, that is an important thing also, to just work it into our daily habits already, so that it's not another thing to do necessarily, but it's a natural thing, because tummy time doesn't go away, because by the time a baby is 5 to 6 months old, he or she should be having a preference individually for tummy time. There's a very short period of time when we're really working on this in life.
Okay.
And so that's another thing to consider. Like, it's not a lifetime work. It's just, a really short period of time. But another reason why I came up with the method, because everybody's been doing tummy time. We talked a little bit earlier, like OTs and PTs and developmental movement people have been talking about tummy time for years before I even developed the tummy time method. It's been around. It's just, even when I was working amongst some of the, at a children's hospital, which is a very high-ranking children's hospital, I didn't see anybody that had a way of doing it so that the babies necessarily enjoyed it. And I was very passionate about coming up with that, because, that's I think it's a baby's birthright in a sense to be comfortable in their belly in all positions. And if there's something they don't like about laying on their belly when it's so nurturing to neurodevelopment, that's the thing we need to talk about. And the stimulation into what we call, now many of us know that our guts have really a lot of neurons in it. They're like gut brains,
right? And the second brain, right?
Yeah, and this concept of the enteric nervous system, meaning that our gut has its own nervous system even. Mm-hmm. And it's has as many or more, these neurotransmitters that our brain has. And it's really kind of interesting that we need what we call ventral surface weight bearing, which is weight bearing on the front half of the body with the body and gravity in order for that to develop normally. So that's why babies like to be held too, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because you're holding them on the front of their body, and that's the pressure receptors are receiving that, and it's nurturing and enriching those neurodevelopmental connections between the brainstem and the cortical areas and back to the body.
So so I was going to ask, like, what does it show then if a baby doesn't like tummy time, that they're laying there on there, though it should be soothing, but it's not? Like, where does a parent go from there?
Oh, thanks for asking that. That's good. So basically, it's, we want to pair out and find out what the reason is, because I think that whatever the reason is needs to be addressed. And so, a lot of times it's digestive. Sometimes it's postural, because many babies, I would say all babies actually, have a head turning preference to one side. And so for some babies that's more, it's the movement hasn't happened. And so when we turn them over, the baby has all these reflexes that start to turn on, because most of the reflexes with babies won't turn on really unless they are belly down to the earth. Okay. If we're laying on our backs, we don't have a lot of reflexes working for us when we're babies. We'll still suck and we'll root, but we don't have head lifting and head turning reflexes on our back. Those happen on our belly. So for some babies, these are intense inputs, and so it's overwhelming. Right. And this is where I came up with the terminology for babies: autonomic nervous system regulation and resiliency. And that's all fancy words for saying how the baby stays calm with these big rushes of sensory input from gravity, the surface, their reflexes, which need to work and turn on. Because one of the biggest things I think going on with kids today, not just babies, but kids, is, lack of, integration of the postural primitive reflexes. That's just, they linger on, and permeate the way the baby, the child can develop in their coordination and et cetera. But anyway, so it's about helping them feel really comfortable there. And this is what builds a healthy nervous system, so they be able to, their digestion to mature and to get comfortable in different positions.
Which then, like, fast forwarding to like toddler years, preschool years, even beyond, like you're saying, you're building a stress resiliency and a flexibility to adapt to an extreme stimulus, whatever it might be, and to work with it and through it, rather than it just frying the circuits and then mom and dad rushing in to save them and take them off their belly.
Yeah. And exactly. And what I love about, another thing is, I like babies to learn and moms to do, and dads to do this together. I mean, this is a very connected activity. It's not something we do to the baby. It's, we're there with the baby. This is something that's really wonderful and fun and connecting. And we'll get to notice more subtle cues about what's going on with the baby. And that helps us to read their body language better, which helps us to meet their needs better. And the better we can all meet each other's needs and have effective communication, those are relationships that the parenting relationship will really benefit from, the whole time.
Right.
Is learning how to know about our kids in that way. Because it's not, the TummyTime method is not just about getting on your belly for development. It is that too. That makes sense about why we do it. But it's really to help the nervous system get really healthy and be able to be resilient, like you said, to these challenges and everyday life activities, the stresses of all of our lives. And we're saying, oh, well, babe, what stress does it take to be a baby? Are you kidding me? There's not another time in our life where we're growing faster. Our 60% of our brains, like up to 80% of our head growth, we go from being completely dependent babies laying on our backs in whatever position we're being put in, to crawling away and possibly even walking away from our parents in 1 year.
Right.
It's a big deal. A big thing that happens in the pre-crawling period is where all of this, and this is a chiropractor, where all of the foundation for our posture is laid down,
and core
and our
strength and sensory integration.
That's what is behind sensory integration, is the getting overwhelmed thing and not being able to take care of it. So that's another reason why that was my bigger impetus for developing something to make it fun and helpful, was for it to be able to make sensory integration earlier more of a reality for babies and parents.
So would you recommend, like, say, a parents with their kiddo doing tummy time, you see the baby kind of crescendoing up and not really liking it in that moment, to take him out of that? Or are you wanting to so yes.
Yeah. So I'll just go over the method really quick, because we've got parents listening in. And so basically we start with, it's about 8 stages. Just breaking it down, but you also can veer from it. It's not, I don't like cookie cutter in a recipe. We always learn it, it's like at first you got to look on your GPS how to get to your favorite place, and then you learn the map and you don't have to use it less and less over time. And then you can take an alternate route. But to start out with, we hold the baby up close to our chest, and then we lower the baby down to the floor. And we want to do this slow, and so that the baby doesn't get startled. At all. And sometimes I even say, stay really, really close as you're lowering the baby down, but we're starting the baby on their back on the floor.
Okay.
And the first thing to do is to do what we call social engagement. And that is, we're going to just have a real fun time exchanging facial expressions, trying to encourage a smile, or just looking at each other, just eye gazing. And at that point, sometimes even I encourage parents to sing or just coo, those natural things we do to babies. Because when we have this lilting kind of parent ease voice, it signals to the baby that, hey, everything's okay. Right. And you're safe. And this is what we want to make sure that the nervous system knows all the time. It's about safety. And so we'll just get the baby's face, what I say, online, or expressing a little bit. And then we know, hey, the baby's ready for a challenge. So we roll the baby, and I like to use the pelvis or the lower body to just gently and slowly roll the baby under their side and then over to their belly really gently. It's almost like the baby does it on their own. And then to look back and just say, does the baby need anything? And lay right down there with them, because this is just as connected as holding the baby. You're right down there. And sometimes the babies their arm got trapped, or they need to move their head, and they So sometimes I'll say, I wonder if they want me to help them get their arm out, and I'll try. But then the baby's there until they reach what is called a peak of excitability. And Dr. Brazelton, who's one of my favorite pediatricians from the Boston area, he talked about the peak of excitability. And I really love that term as a developmental therapist. And so what that means is that when the baby needs to take a break, we know, or something needs to change. And at that point, sometimes I'll offer sucking, because that really helps the baby, and they'll just like suck away and calm down and stay there. But a lot of times what it means is to roll the baby out. So you tuck their arm and you roll the baby out. Don't just pick and pluck them up, because we want to roll. This is the sensory integration piece of it. And then pick the baby up. Get the baby upright against your chest. And then we hold the baby and calm the baby and soothe and connect and help the baby until they're, we call recovered, or they have a pleasant facial expression, or they're just relaxed again. And if we had spent a short period of time in TummyTime, we're going to lower them down and repeat that whole process over and over again. Mm-hmm. So that's what's helped. It helps to develop procedural memory, like riding a bike. It's the same way a little bit every time. And the baby begins to get a real affinity for the routineness and the consistency of it. And it starts to feel good, actually. And this is the turning point that most of the parents that I've worked with over the years, and this has been 10 years or a little bit more even, that I've been using this method. Very effective results. And not, like I said, it does maximize how much time a baby spends, and it does help with head turning and stuff. But what I love about it is it helps the nervous system be healthy and resilient. And I'm a firm believer, if we can work on that and help the baby have no barriers to that and do really good with their social, emotional, interactional, and sensory processing skills, that we unlock anything for that baby. And we're really tapping into the intrinsic motivation, because, again, it's not doing to the baby, but being with the baby, playing with, and helping. Because babies are born, they're fraught with asymmetries. That means one side's doing something more than another. Almost every baby likes looking one direction more than another. Almost all babies have a little bit of cranial molding just from in utero position. Lots of babies are packed tight in there. And so that's another thing, is we're naturally helping them to work these things out. And before they become a problem, an obvious problem.
Or anchor in and become just permanent, as far as like cranial molding or things like that.
Yeah. And that's what we're seeing, you and I are seeing in our offices, is torticollis and plagiocephaly. And that's why I'm advocating for earlier identification by the professionals and routing to professionals like us who can treat that and help the body with movement and manual therapy and that hands-on types of things and movement to eradicate these asymmetries and make it easy to move both ways, because that's the whole purpose of the first 3 months of life anyway, which we call, the fourth trimester.
Right.
Is we need to gestate longer, but we just can't. We simply can't, because of our size and our head size. Right. So we have to come out and gestate for those next 12 weeks, but we also need to move and kind of undo those kinks that we've had in the womb.
Right, and be stimulated to move in those kind of more natural ways, because we're doing more back to sleep, and there's a lot of carriers and things out there, just make it more convenient for us to move the babies around rather than just being with them and letting them be stimulated and move around and unwind that stress.
Right, and in a back sleeping culture, we need intentional tummy time experiences, because we have to offset all that time that baby spends laying on their back. And let me just say this about back sleeping. Because we're in a back sleeping culture, and because I just told you a little bit ago that babies do not have head turning reflexes active on their back, okay? They need, for us, the adults, to make sure their head position changes at night. So half the night the baby needs to be looking to the right, and half the night the baby needs to be looking to their left.
Okay.
And that's something really simple parents can do that can make a huge difference. And don't expect it to change right away, because if the baby's been looking to the right and that was their preference in the womb, you're not going to change it by just one time. Think about if somebody were to ask you to change your habit in one day.
Right. It's almost like crossing your legs, right? You're used to crossing your legs one way, and then you start doing it the other way. You just feel all funky. But you can train it.
And it maybe even makes you irritable. Like, when I'm doing something new, I'm like more edgy,
Yeah. Well,
and that's the same for babies.
Well, and to connect those things for the kiddos, to be able to allow them, and kind of coming back to what we talked about before, is one, resiliency, but also like having a full range of tools to be able to use rather than being stuck in just one, one biomechanically turning your head one side, but just having full range so they can, have so much more available to them to navigate their own lives as they're growing up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Liberating all of those movements that are there. Even a baby that I'll see that doesn't have much movement to another side, it's there. We just have to liberate it. And I've yet to meet really a baby with torticollis that it's more about a tight muscle, that it's really more about a lack of activation on the opposite side. Now, if they've been turned to one side, sometimes those muscles and the connective tissue and just the soft tissue body shortens on one side over time. But that shouldn't eradicate movement to the other side.
Right.
And so it's more about strengthening. Let's say a baby has a head preference to the right side. It's more about strengthening the neck, turning to the left, than stretching the right side.
Right. Well, in our closing moments here, like, Michelle, tell our listeners how they can find out more about, one, your method, but also I've noticed on your website too, there's links for professionals to be able to, one, learn it, but then also maybe a list for parents to find people to help them with it.
Yeah. So parents can go to TummyTimeMethod.com, and there are some tips and information on the website. And I also have a provider listing, people who have trained with me. And this will be continuing, ongoing, and we will be gathering more and more professionals to connect with people who can help you learn. I also Skype. It's very effective over Skype because really this method can be taught in any way, even online. And if you're on Instagram, at TummyTime Method is an Instagram where I have a lot of informational pictures and tips and modifications for tummy time and just how to have fun and lots of cute babies,
right,
and families.
I'll include that for sure, because I get a lot out of your Instagram posts. There's even like you have a picture, say, even I'm thinking of the tongue tie pictures you have of like, this is what's normal, this is not. It's very instructional in that way, and one as a practitioner sense, but all your other ones as well, giving those tips. So the visuals are really, really powerful.
Thank you very much. Yeah. I enjoy making them because they make sense to me, and if they can make sense to me, they can make sense to anybody, because it has to be simple. We have very busy lives, and babies take a lot of care. And crying babies that don't like doing tummy time is not a fun thing to make. And that's where my heart is and my passion. And I developed this whole thing to make it fun and accessible and also really therapeutic and beneficial and a connector and a way to help baby feel really safe and yet resilient, because we really are amazing creatures and what we're capable of, and to be able to liberate that and let everybody live their best life. That's what I'm all about. So I really appreciate what you're doing and it's being so helpful for all of us. And so thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for being here. I mean, I've learned so much myself, but I also know it's a topic that a lot of parents have tons of questions about and need to know more about. And I just feel your passion. I feel your expertise as well in talking about it. So I encourage you listeners, get in touch with her website, the thing. I didn't even know you did Skype conferencing. That's fantastic. So people can work individually with you, but then also finding the professional directory. Well, yes. Michelle, so in our last moment, what's the major take home you'd like to tell a parent that's listening to this to take away from it?
Well, the take home is I'd like you to try doing the method and see how it works for you.
Yeah.
And to consider that it's not just about development or doing something to check off a box, but something to help really build into the connection and the health and wellness of our children.
Yeah. And what about for the little ones that might be listening, either in utero, they're still not here in the world yet, they're listening through mama's earbuds, or they're here? What would you like to whisper in their little ear?
Well, that's a really good one, because the basis is it doesn't really matter the content of the words that are spoken, because babies are very much in that pre-verbal skills, but the way I use my voice and the way that I would possibly sing a lullaby or reassuring words about love and safety and connection and, what's going on in the world, and just that I'm there to, offer the presence and to help connect. And that's really, for me, what it's all about.
Fantastic. Well, Michelle, again, thank you for being here. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hi, it's Dr. J again, and I want to thank you so much for listening to the podcast. It's something I really enjoy doing, and I, as a parent, learn a ton from these experts coming on and sharing their wisdom, so I hope you're getting a lot out of it too. And I want to share something else with you. I've created a guide called the 40 Ways to Connect with Your Baby During Pregnancy. It's full of simple things you can do on a day-to-day basis that will help strengthen that bond that you have with your baby. It's a free download. You can go to my website at drjwarren.com/40ways and just enter your email. I'll send it right to you. You can download it and start working on it right away. All of the research that I'm learning in the fields of epigenetics and attachment parenting is showing that the more bonded you are during your pregnancy with your baby, the better the birth is going to go and the better parenting is going to go, because you have that strong foundation, a strong connection to build upon. So go again to my website. It's drjwarren.com/40ways and get that free guide. And again, thanks for listening.